We must be mindful of the larger cultural context. The taboo around sex and the lack of open dialogue around it contribute to the confusion and the silence that trafficking victims experience. When we don't talk openly about sex, consent, and autonomy, we do create an environment where abuse can thrive. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kira, and this is my segment called Coffee Talk. Today, I am addressing a subject that often brings up some confusion and stigma. It's trafficking. If this is your first time here, welcome. I want to invite you back. Please subscribe and like this video. I am a wellness guru for sex workers of all types. This episode was really important for me to create. I have another episode in which we address trafficking minimally, and I wanted to explore it a little bit more in this specific episode. I find it's really important to begin to discuss these subjects so that people can really begin to identify what might be magical thinking and deciphering it and having critical thought and deciding what is actual fact. If you are new here, I do talk a little bit about how I personally was affected by childhood abuse. In order for me to heal, I had to do a lot of understanding, mostly with CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, so that I personally could begin to decipher what is magical thinking and what is factual thinking. I think one of the biggest reasons why I choose to discuss these subjects is because I realize that these are very real things happening, and me being not only a sex worker, but a survivor of all kinds of childhood abuse. I do want to address the actual word trafficking. It sometimes can be sensationalized, and so because of that, I feel that it's important to go ahead and pull out what the actual legal definition is. The term is often misused when addressing sex work in general, and this misunderstanding leads to a dangerous narrative of all sex work, and that it is all non-consensual, or maybe that it's forced. And I want to make sure that our voices of those who choose the profession, yes, we choose the profession. Sex work and trafficking are two different entities. Time that we're challenging the misconceptions. I believe that by understanding the true meaning of trafficking and respecting the autonomy of sex workers, we can begin to dismantle this harmful stigma. According to U.S. federal law, under the Trafficking Victims Act, trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. The recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for a commercial act, where such an act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act is under 18 years of age. It is important to understand the difference between trafficking and consensual sex work, and that they are not the same. Consensual sex work is one made with full agency. Sex workers know exactly why and what they are doing. And this is one reason why I believe there should be clear decriminalization of sex work. Doing this is going to help victims of trafficking recognizing the abuse they endure, which often goes unnoticed. They need to understand what is being done to them is wrong and that they have a choice. Trafficking is undeniably abusive and violent, yet many narratives are steeped in guilt and shame. And these are emotions often carried by the victims themselves. And victims often believe that they themselves are bad or wrong for things that they were forced to do, even when those actions were completely out of their control. This has internalized shame, and honestly, it's become a powerful tool for their abusers. And for many lawmakers and politicians who often coin the word trafficking, it is crucial for these victims to be addressed as victims because of what has been done to them. The abuse, it thrives on that dysfunction. It exploits vulnerabilities that are often created by childhood trauma, abuse, and addiction. I've heard many stories of trafficking, stories by the victims themselves. Many have addressed that they somehow could have prevented their victimization, and this couldn't be further from the truth. This is a narrative of self-blame. They are themselves the victim and they are blaming themselves. Part of victim blaming is something that stems from how they learned how to talk about sex in general. We must be mindful of the larger cultural context. The taboo around sex and the lack of open dialogue around it contribute to the confusion and the silence that trafficking victims experience. When we don't talk openly about sex, consent, and autonomy, we do create an environment where abuse can thrive. I do want this episode to be about reclaiming the truth of these stories and amplifying the voices of these survivors, and that we are able to empower and take away that shame and guilt. One of my passions is also about challenging the societal frameworks that equate trafficking with victims as being their own personal failure. Recognizing that these people were victims of deeply abused systems out of their control. When we decriminalize sex work, we're going to be empowering victims to feel safe to come forward and report abuse without fear. They're going to be able to access resources and create safer spaces for themselves and others. I hope this episode just is a reminder that when we choose compassion over judgment, truth over silence, and autonomy over control, we create a world where healing becomes possible. Together, we can honor the strength of survivors, support sex workers as valuable contributors to society, and work to a place where people are not forced into silence and shame. If you have made it this far with me, I want to thank you. Time is such a valuable asset. The fact that you have chosen to be with me through this means so much, and I will talk to you soon.